If you've seen the title of this video, you already know that today we're going to be getting into the lore and ecology of Paras. And if you're here watching a video talking about lore and theory crafting, or if you are or ever were 13 at any point, you've probably seen a lot of videos like this.
Insane Pokedex entries. These Pokemon are darker than you think. Top 5 Pokedex entries so dark you'll do a backflip.
That sort of thing. And if you haven't, welcome. I'm flattered mine is the first video you clicked on. In any case, it should come as no surprise to anyone that Paras and Parasect are infected with some sort of deadly fungus, which eventually takes over their minds. Some of you may even know that the fungus in the real world is known as cordyceps, but hang on just a little longer, because I've got a lot more to say on this topic, and some of it might even surprise you. And if you found this video interesting at any point, leave a like, because I like to see the little number go up. And if you're not subscribed already, I hope you will, because these videos are only going to get better and better. You've probably gathered that ecology is a big interest of mine, but one facet of it that really fascinates me is mycology, the study of mushrooms. Now, mushrooms are really interesting to me for a number of reasons. One is that they're neither plant nor animal, but another secret third thing. Another reason is the extreme variation you might see in mushrooms, from shape to color to spore print. Third is a lot of interesting things mushrooms can do, like, for instance,
infecting hosts, forcing them to do their bidding, taking over their brains, and eventually dying for the cause.
To start this video, let's take a look at Paras and see how the real-life versions of the mushrooms compare to the ones that grow on its back. Like I said earlier, the mushrooms growing on Paras's back is a type of cordyceps, but thanks to the Pokedex, we can even tell what specific species of cordyceps it is. The Silver Dex entry for Paras states that, as its body grows, large oriental mushrooms named tochukaso start sprouting out of its back. A quick Google search will tell you that tochukaso is the Japanese common name for Ophiocordyceps sinensis, or otherwise known as the caterpillar fungus. And if you've consumed The Last of Us in any way, I'm sure you can see where this is going. Yes, by the way, I watched and played The Last of Us just to write this video. Excellent, by the way. Highly recommend both. The caterpillar fungus works in a very similar way to the type of cordyceps most people are familiar with, the zombie ant fungus, or Ophiocordyceps unilateralis. In both these cases, some spores will get onto the body of the host bug and will begin to grow, eventually spreading mycelium roots throughout the nervous system. Once this happens, the ant will begin behaving very erratically, leaving the group and crawling up a leaf before biting down on it. Once it has, the cordyceps will tighten all of the muscles in the jaw in a sort of rigor mortis, preventing the ant from leaving that spot. It's for this reason it's known as the death bite. Eventually, after the ant has passed away, a fruiting body will begin to grow from the head, which will release more spores and infect more ants. In the caterpillar fungus, the caterpillar will also eventually die, with the body being covered up by this fungus. Also, a fruiting body will emerge from the head to release more spores. Now let's compare that to Paras and Parasect. In Pokemon Sun, Paras's Dex entry indicates that, no matter how much it eats, the mushrooms growing on its back steal away most of the nutrients it consumes, implying that Paras is always hungry, being driven to consume more and more for the fungus. It also seems to become extremely aggressive, as I'm sure anyone who's played Pokemon Legends Arceus can attest. When it evolves, things get a little worse for it, with Parasect's Pokedex entry from Pokemon Yellow stating that the bug host is drained of energy by the mushrooms on its back. They appear to do all of the thinking. Cordyceps thrive best in warm, humid environments, which is also similar to the game, where Parasect's Gold Pokedex entry states that it stays mostly in dark, damp places, the preference not of the bug, but of the big mushrooms on its back. While, according to other Dex entries, the spores and mushrooms produced in the Alola region are not of as high a quality. Parasect also has this dead behind the eyes look. Look at him. Not thought behind those eyes. One other thing about the caterpillar fungus is that it can be extremely valuable. This is both because it's very rare to find and also because it's used in a lot of traditional Chinese medicines. A kilogram of this stuff can sell for up to 20,000 US dollars. Now compare this to the games where a little mushroom will only sell for about 500 Pokédollars, while a big mushroom will get you a cool 2,500. We can also get some specifics on the medicinal part from various Pokedex entries, which state things like how it's highly valued as a medicine for extending life, or how it's often prepared by being steeped and boiled or dried and powdered, depending on if it's a Parasect or a Paras mushroom, And then this one really specific entry from Pokemon Fire Red, which says that in China, the spores are used as herbal medicine. I don't know if this happens anywhere else in the series, but I personally feel a little weird knowing that China, or any other real-life country for that matter, exists canonically in the Pokemon world. Like, hang on, gotta fly over to Shanghai real quick to catch a Stuffle. Now, like I said earlier, this should be information that most people watching this video already know. I'm certainly not the first person to make a video on this topic. But what I don't often see from any of these other videos is how Paras did not originally come with these mushrooms to begin with. In the Pokemon Legends Arceus Pokedex entry for Paras, it states that the mushrooms on its back, called Tochikaso, are not present on infant specimens, and instead emerge as Paras matures. Furthermore, the Gold Dex entry states that it is doused with mushroom spores when it is born. As its body grows, mushrooms sprout from its back. So Paras is not initially born with any relation to the fungus. So where does it come from? In cordyceps, after the bug has died and at the end of the mushroom's life cycle, a fruiting body will emerge from the carcass and begin releasing spores. It seems to work in a very similar manner for Parasect, which we can see from its Crystal Pokédex entry. When nothing's left to extract from the bug, the mushrooms on its back leave spores on the bug's eggs. Just like some weird and deadly coming of age, at the end of its life cycle, the Parasect will lay eggs, only for its babies to be taken over by the same fungus which is now controlling its own body. This allows the Tochikaso to continue to propagate and thrive. To me, there's something very interesting here. If Paras is initially born without the mushroom, then the species exists fully separate from it. This implies that before the spores get in and begin taking over, turning the poor little guy into our fungusy friend here, that Paras is an entirely different Pokemon. Maybe one we've never seen before, but maybe just one we've seen elsewhere. Before that, let's look at Paras without all the gross mushroomy bits. Now, the bug part of Paras is based on the nymph cicada. Now, you probably know cicadas as the annoying bug that pops up every couple of years and absolutely refuses to shut up. But it's actually a bit more than that. Actually, I'm going to take a minute to stand on my soapbox here for a little bit. Cicadas are mad cool. There are over 3,000 different species of them worldwide, and most of them appear every year, except for 2 species specifically from North America that emerge en masse every 13 and 17 years respectively. They're called periodical cicadas, or magicicadas, and everybody hates them because they're bugs. But like, imagine if it was like a special species of deer that you could only see every 17 years. Like, I feel like people would be flocking to see it. And by the way, since they only emerge every 13 and 17 years, those cycles only line up once for one season every 221 years, with the last time they lined up being this past summer in 2024. So if you missed it, mark your calendars for 2245, I guess. Anyway, when you think of cicadas, you think of these guys. But Paras and Parasect are both based on nymph cicadas, so this, but more prepubescent. Now, before cicadas are getting stuck in dogs' mouths and being posted on TikTok, they're spending their lives digging underground, hoping to sop up some of that sweet, sweet nectar from the roots of trees. Speaking of tree roots, do you know how these little critters are able to tell when it's time to crawl their way out of the dirt? Well, they're able to tell what time of year it is based on minute changes in that yummy delicious tree root good, much like people knowing that fall has finally arrived because Starbucks has started rolling out those pumpkin spice lattes. So that's how a cicada can tell what time of year it is. But what about the 13 and 17 year cycles? Like, those seem like oddly specific numbers. Most cicada species spend a long period of time underground while growing, but they don't all emerge at once. A couple will emerge every year, unlike the periodical cicadas, which emerge en masse. Well, the leading theory behind this is that it's set up to fool predators. This is done in 2 ways. For starters, if either of these cicada species had any specific predators, ones that got along by exclusively hunting them, they would either die off or have to find something else to eat in the long time that these cicadas stay underground. Additionally, for the predators that are still around and are willing to make these cicadas a meal, they sort of adopt the same mindset as those guys that were going to storm Area 51 in a "they can't stop us all" mentality. At the same time, since 13 and 17 are prime numbers, cicadas are able to dodge any other periodical insect species, say those that come around every 4, 5, or 6 years. These predators include things like cicada killer wasps, praying mantises, and bats. But for nymph cicadas that still live underground, they're most often eaten by things like moles. So for Paras and Parasect, we've got Drillbur and Diglett that seem like the most likely candidates for predators. Getting back to Paras and Parasect, the two share a lot of similarities with the nymph cicada, firstly in appearance. Paras and Parasect both have these large, strong claws at the ends of their front legs, which are probably good for digging, and Paras has these strong mandibles, which are used for cutting into tree roots and drinking sap, though Parasect seems to lose these during evolution. There's also the Pokemon Red Pokedex entry for Paras, which states that it burrows to suck tree roots. The mushrooms on its back grow by drawing nutrients from the bug host, which indicates that Paras has the same feeding habits as a nymph cicada. Not to mention the fact that when these periodical cicadas emerge, they all emerge at once. Compare that to Parasect's Dex entry in Ruby and Sapphire, which states that they are known to infest large tree species en masse and drain nutrients from the lower trunk and roots. So Paras is clearly a nymph cicada, and that's all well and good. But Parasect is, what, just a bigger nymph cicada? It doesn't make any sense to me. Why would the evolutionary line of the Pokemon not represent the full life cycle of the animal? Why would Paras evolve into a larger and stronger version of the immature bug? Well, as it turns out, there is a Pokemon that fully represents the life cycle of the cicada, and that's our boy Nincada. Nincada starts off very much like Paras. It's a small bug that uses its much larger front claws to dig around in the dirt and leech off of the roots of trees. Its Sapphire Pokedex entry states that it lives underground. It uses its sharp claws to carve the roots of trees and absorb moisture and nutrients. Since they spend so much time underground, they're probably preyed upon by things like Zigzagoon, Venipede, and Dewpider. And after spending so much time underground, sometimes as much as 10 years according to the Heart Gold and Soul Silver Dex entries, they will eventually mature into a fully evolved Ninjask, now complete with two much larger membranous wings, legs that fold into the body to remain flying all the time, and deep red eyes set wide apart, very similar to cicadas in real life. This evolution also sometimes comes with a slight secondary effect. See, when you evolve Nincada into a Ninjask, and you just so happen to have an empty Pokeball in your bag and an empty slot in your party, a Shedinja will just appear there. No battling, no catching, it just goes into the Pokeball, and now you've got a new friend. This is, at least according to the Sapphire Pokedex entry, which states that it seems to appear unsought in a Pokeball after a Nincada evolves. Shedinja also just so happens to be the much more cool and interesting version of Ninjask. Ninjask is fine. I mean, competitively it didn't make a splash. It's fast, but it doesn't have a lot it can do with it. But Shedinja, on the other hand, has the most broken ability in the game, bar none. The ability is called Wonder Guard, and it means that Shedinja is immune to all damage from any move unless that move is super effective. The only downside here is that Shedinja's typing is Bug Ghost, which means that it's weak against all of these types. Like, imagine putting Wonder Guard on a pure electric type and then giving it an air balloon just to be safe. Man, a guy can dream. Still, pretty cool that these are the only moves that can damage it, except for the other downside, which is that Shedinja will only ever have 1 HP. Yep, it's got the lowest HP stat in the game, and it will never grow, meaning that any move of any of these types will always immediately knock it out. Another thing about Shedinja that you've likely heard in these Pokemon lore so dark it made my dog leave the room videos is that Shedinja has a large hole in the back of its body, likely where the newly evolved Ninjask emerged after shedding the skin. This comes with a variety of Pokedex entries, like the ones from Pokemon Black, which states that peering into the crack in its back is said to steal one's spirit. Other items of note about Shedinja are in the design. It's got these decrepit wings that seem to be falling away. It's got no legs and seems to just be floating all the time. And it's got no eyes, just empty sockets, much like a Freddy's Pizzeria suit that's just waiting to have a kid stuffed into it. To top it all off, it's got a halo above its head, really pulling together the whole "it's not a phase, Mom, I'm really just dead" motif. So, the Nincada line has a Pokemon that represents the nymphal stage of the cicada, the fully mature stage, and my god, even the discarded shell gets a Pokemon that represents it. This is why it's so weird to me that the Paras line only has representation for the nymphal stage of the cicada. It doesn't make any sense until you consider that Paras and Nincada might be the same Pokemon. My theory here is that a Paras and Nincada are essentially born the same Pokemon, except that after a Paras is just hatched, an adult Parasect who has long been infected with the Tochikazo mushroom will come along and spread spores over the baby, dooming it to become the Paras we know and love today. Consider that Nincada and Paras are never found on any of the same routes, despite being very similar in behavior and ecological niche. This actually might be a little bit rooted in fact, as cicadas are extremely endemic creatures. What this means is that there are thousands and thousands of species of cicadas, except that the variety that can be found in New Zealand, for instance, can only be found in New Zealand and nowhere else. They're like that weird cousin that never leaves their mom's basement. This indicates a high degree of adaptability among cicadas, and might mean that they can evolve relatively quickly to adapt to new environments. Interestingly enough, the cordyceps mushrooms show that same high degree of adaptability. Cordyceps are prone to morphing. This is theorized to be because a cordyceps mushroom will maximize its infection rate on one specific species of insect. Though, since different species of bugs can be found in the same area, they'll often be infected by that one species of cordyceps, leading to a new species developing. Multiply this by 1,000, considering that this fungus has a range from Japan all the way to the United States. There are some other changes caused to a paras and parasect by the fungus, aside from the obvious big, large mushroom attached to its back. For instance, some other appearance differences, like Nincada has these tiny wings attached to its back, whereas Paras already has mushrooms growing in the same place, likely being the reason it never fully matures into a flying type. Paras also spends more time above ground, which is why it has these large, seen some stuff eyes, whereas Nincada has these wide black eyes, which are likely adapted for seeing underground and in dark caves. The Fire Red and Leaf Green Pokedex for Nincada even says that because it lived almost entirely underground, it is nearly blind. It uses its antennae instead. Being underground also gives Nincada a secondary ground typing, whereas Paras is infected with the spores and gains a secondary poison typing. A young Paras likely resembles a Nincada, but begins to change more and more as the mushrooms begin to grow. I imagine if a young Paras was taken away before it could be infected with the spores, it would eventually evolve into a ninjask, or some variation of one. However, what happens to a Paras as it matures is that it simply becomes a larger version of the prepubescent stage that it was never able to fully grow out of, now large enough to provide a body for the cordyceps to fully take over. Basically, Paras never fully matures into the cicada that it's supposed to be. Instead, the fungus hits the pause button on puberty and steals the controller. So instead of getting a speedy bug ninja like Ninjask, it becomes, well, a mushroom zombie crab, which is great for the fungus, terrible for the bug, and incredibly weird for the Pokedex. Thank you for watching. I hope this video has taught you a little bit more about Paras and Nincada and provided you with a greater appreciation for the amazing real-world creatures that inspire our favorite game. If you've got a Pokemon you'd like me to cover the ecology of next, I hope you'll leave a comment, and I'll see you next time on the Pokecologist.